From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris here on a Monday. I do indeed hope you had a very pleasant weekend. We've got a good show on tap for you. We talked about last week that he would be coming on. We're going to open up the phone lines, your chance to talk a bit what we've seen recently happening at the Tennessee State Legislature. Of course, you know there was a special session in place where a wide range of new laws were put onto the books. I guess they call it the COVID-19 Omnibus Bill. It's something that is not yet, or the items have not all yet officially taken effect, or won't until the governor addresses it and signs it, which we expect should happen in the next few days. But a lot of people talking about much of this addressing the issue of COVID and masks and mandates and some other things beyond that as well. And we're going to get into this morning with someone who is right in the middle of it all, one of the state lawmakers, one of the most powerful men in the state of Tennessee, and that would be the Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming on. You're a busy guy, and you took time out of your morning on a Monday to join me on Morning Line.
Well, I appreciate the invite. It's always good to be here with you.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I'm trying to decide exactly where to start on all this. I know it's been now more than well over a week since this wrapped up. As you sit here right now, I'm just curious, from where you sit at your office, and we'll go over some of the main items that were passed. What kind of feedback have you been getting to this point? Where do you think things stand as we sit here waiting for the governor to sign?
Well, I mean, I think we've been getting good feedback from Tennesseans. I've traveled across the state a couple of times here in the last couple of days since we've been out. A lot of good feedback. I think also last week with OSHA and with the Attorney General suing and Texas suing and putting an injunction on the OSHA regs has really helped people. I think the problem is people want to have control of their lives, and they feel like they're losing more and more control and freedoms, and I think that's what we were trying to address.
So that's what this came about. And isn't this one of the few times where a special session was called not by the governor, but by the lawmakers themselves?
It's only the third time is what we were told, yes.
All right, let's just go over, some of what we passed, or what you passed rather, and what we have as new laws. The idea, a lot of the focus was on vaccines and mandates and whether or not you have to show a card one way or the other. When the original law was, kind of discussed and passed, we know, obviously, we heard about Ford and some of the other big employers having some concerns with this. When they did, can you tell me a little bit about how it was that you guys decided to go back and modify some of this?
Well, I never had conversations with Ford. I'm sure they reached out to some senators and some House people. But all along, our members, there was a mix on the mask mandates for the businesses, allowing them or not allowing them to do that. So that was always a question. It was in the bill. The thing to remember, though, in the General Assembly is usually where a bill starts off, especially one like this, it's complicated, and where it ends is usually different because the process will play itself out. And so the process played itself out, and enough members in the House and Senate wanted to take that portion out.
It got your attention when Ford and some of the others said as much, didn't it?
Well, I mean, I had meetings all week with business people, and from what they were telling me, that was only the third thing on their list. It wasn't the most important, but it was third.
Okay, and so I guess when it comes to private employers, so the idea is the law will allow them to mandate, right? But that they cannot require proof of it, is that?
Yeah, so on the vaccine, what we did is we looked at what other states have done. States who had just banned vaccines from being mandated got turned over in court. We went with a Texas model, what Governor Abbott was trying to do, which is you can still mandate it as a business, but you can't compel someone to show proof of their vaccination.
So what does that mean? How do you take that? They can mandate it, but you can't really get them to show you one way or the other. So if they choose not to, does the mandate really work?
Well, potentially not. What we did do is what that does say is to that individual that we're protecting your health freedom, that we're protecting your rights about your health care information, and whether or not the employer should have that. Now, if you want to show it, you perfectly can. If you want to take the vaccine, you can, but we're protecting your healthcare information to be your information, not to be released to the employer.
What about with regard to whether or not municipalities, I guess we've said all along, has it been 6 of the cities that were allowed to, because they have their own health departments and they're large enough to and Nashville being one of them, or Davidson County. So moving forward, it's going to be uniform, meaning that the city's health directors now have to abide by whatever it is the state's commissioner of health and the governor mandate.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we have, whether it was quarantine or anything else, there's a lot of different policies out there, from school boards to governments to the independent health departments. And what we try to do with this bill is we put in a new title, Title 14, just for COVID, so we would know what this is about and there's no questions about it. And then we try to create uniform standards around that title to allow people to understand what can happen and what cannot happen. Because if you lived in one county compared to another, it could be vastly different. And we wanted to make sure that regardless of where you are in Tennessee, everything was uniformed.
Okay. It's just curious. It does seem like so much of what came out of this goes contrary sometimes to what, the Republican Party in this state, which is all about less government. It seems like it's dictating more government to the local municipalities. How do you square that approach in your mind? I mean, it's because you're mandating more stuff for the cities and the communities and telling them what to do as opposed to letting them do it themselves.
Well, also, though, people have their constitutional rights to freedom, to liberty, to pursuit of happiness. They have individual rights. And so how we viewed this was us helping the people with their constitutional rights, which we felt like were being trampled on with unconstitutional mandates coming down from the federal government, not having a uniform standard. If you're going to do business in the state of Tennessee, you don't want to have 95 different policies depending on where you may or may not go or where you live. And so really we're trying to protect people's constitutional rights as well as create a uniform standard all across the state.
And I think the argument throughout a lot of this with mandates, I don't know how you think about this, and vaccines and the like, is that, yeah, there are, it's your body and what you do to it and whether a mandate's legit or not. It's also a public health issue as well. I mean, do you worry about balancing the two of those? A lot of people maybe, and there's a lot of bad information out there on certain things, in terms of how you can care for yourself. But how do you balance, individual rights with the good of the general public as a whole, hoping to try to finally wipe out this dang pandemic?
Well, I mean, I think if you even look at what President Biden did, right? He's the first U.S. president that has ordered to use OSHA to do a mass vaccination mandatory of the American public. No one else at present has ever done that. That's a new direction for him. So as we're looking through this capability here, we really want to put individual choice in the forefront. You should have a right to make healthcare decisions for yourself. And in this instance, a lot of people wanted to have that. You weigh the risk, you have to understand the consequences. But the thing is what you also have is you have people who are mandating vaccines to people who already had COVID, who already have antibodies. Or you're mandating it to people who have other health conditions that can't take it. Or you're mandating it to people who just have a philosophical difference and they don't feel ready to take it yet. And those discussions should not be forced upon you by government. They should be in consultation with your healthcare provider. That's really who should be having those conversations. You shouldn't have government forcing you to do something or a business forcing you to do something that you may not want to be doing. It should be with you and your healthcare provider making that decision.
With some folks who may have lost their jobs, and some have already because they weren't following mandates, we'll see how things change now. There was talk then, again, of possibly allowing them to qualify for unemployment. If they talk a bit about where that stands right now.
So in the bill, we made it retroactive back. So if you lost your job because you didn't take the vaccine and your employer let you go, you do qualify for unemployment. We made that retroactive. And going forward, you cannot limit someone's employment because they're unwilling to take the vaccine, and you can't fire someone for not wanting to take the vaccine.
All right. So again, some places can have mandates, but they can't ask whether or not you actually had the. You can't ask to show proof of it.
Right. They can't. You can't be compelled to show proof of it.
Okay. And I guess then moving forward, last week, when after this had passed, we had several individuals here from Davidson County. It does seem like sometimes what happens here in Davidson County and doesn't always square with what state lawmakers as a whole are doing. More than a few people think, once again, this is, passing, it applies to the whole state, but boy, we sure think the state lawmakers are taking a hard look at what happens in Nashville and say, look, you don't like what we're doing, but you know what, we're the state, we can do this.
Well, our role as the state, constitutional right, is we're the ones who formed the local governments. We're also the one who formed the national government. Yeah. So the state, by constitution, has the authority to be the overseer of both. And so we take our responsibility seriously. Sometimes we push back, sometimes that we don't. But we didn't think that Metro had the authority, like they were wanting to do a couple weeks ago, to pass an ordinance to do these county-wide mandates. They don't have the authority, and we made sure in this bill that they understood that they do not have the authority to do that.
All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, we can take a few calls. We've got a lot more to talk about with the speaker, including what the lawmakers can do if, as you just said, who has the authority to do what, they say, sorry, we're not going to do it anyway. What can be done? We'll take a break and be back with more right after this.